What's up, guys, and welcome back to another video. We are talking about Black Clover episode 94, and wow, it was actually a really good episode. Not that it hasn't been good in the last few episodes, but this was a really good episode too, with some pretty decent, I guess plot twists. Really good. I'm really excited about it. So first of all, Julius is dead. He, slowly dies throughout the episode, more or less, but he's dead. It's kind of the end. He's bleeding out. There's nothing they can do about it. There's a doctor on the way, but it's just gonna be too late. He knows he's dying. His grimoire starts dissolving. Even his, I thought it was just a tattoo, but it's like a little star thing on his forehead starts dissolving, and I wonder if it's just oh, he had, magic there, and that's what he was doing. I don't know. Either way, he's dead. At the end of the episode last week, just as Julius is getting run through by Licht, Yami shows up, and we basically pick up more or less right there. And Yami does everything in his power to stop Licht. Unfortunately, that teleportation guy, the portal guy on the Eye of the Midnight Sun's side, ends up taking him and getting him out of there just as Yami's attacking, and they get away with the stones and everything. And ultimately, it's just no good. So Yami spends a pretty decent amount of this episode grieving over Julius as he's dying and basically hearing his last words. Meanwhile, back at the Eye of the Midnight Sun's base, they are unaware of all this. They're just doing what their mission is. And it's there's a little bit of stuff going on with the guy that's doing the jamming signals. Oh man, I hope everybody hurries up. I wonder how everybody's doing. I'm getting pretty tired. And he's you as an audience member are oh, so some stuff is going on. Uh-oh. In any event, in the actual hideout, Mira Leona's still kicking Raya's butt. She's using her mana zone. She's all over the place. And so he's really backed up against the wall, and he ends up even trying to use their self-detonation spell that the other third eye people have been trying to use, and that doesn't work because Asta sees through it. Just as he activates kind of a detonation device sphere around him, and if Mira Leona had touched him, that would have been end, but Asta jumps in, hits him with some anti-magic sword business, and ultimately neutralizes it. Then, Asta actually goes on kind of well, it's not a monologue, but he starts kind of going off about how hey, really, how are they any different? They're all fighting for people that they lost or people that have gotten hurt in all of these attacks. And maybe if they just sat down and talked it out and got over everything that was happening, maybe they'd be able to understand each other better. And ultimately, that's really what Julius wants. That's his dream. We kind of cut back and forth between them. And it's really, that's what his dream was. He was trying to build a world where understanding and caring and compassion was more prevalent than anger and hatred and all of that. So he's ultimately kind of, he is kind of knowing that he's leaving the world and Clover King and everything in it up to this new generation of Magic Knights and people in general that he kind of sees some goodness in them, and he's willing to let them kind of pick up the slack there as he's dying. And ultimately, as Julius is dying, he basically says to Yami he's leaving the rest to them. Or he says he's leaving the rest to him, but ultimately it's really the Magic Knights. I don't see Yami becoming the next Wizard King or anything like that. So I don't see that happening, but I definitely see this as being a torch passing kind of thing. Meanwhile, so we're jumping back and forth between Yami and Julius and the Eye of the Midnight Sun's hideout, and so we jump back to Yuno's squad, and they have just arrived at the center of the hideout, and prior to this, they had kind of sensed some weird magic, and they were also hearing a heartbeat, I believe. So they have just arrived at where this source was coming from, and it turns out there's a giant sphere, a light sphere of some sort, with an elf person in the middle. And they just get there and they're well, that's weird. This is weird. I don't know what to make of this. And honestly, it's pretty obvious what's going on here, but clearly they are not supposed to know this yet. We then jump back to Licht, and he and Rades and that teleportation guy and the scientist girl, they're all kind of chatting about how they succeeded, and that now, once they get all the stones on the giant tablet, their plan is going to come to fruition, and they're going to be able to cause chaos and all that. And Rades has a really big mouth, and I don't care for him, which is why it's kind of so sweet to hear the words that came out of Licht's mouth. He basically just, like, drops the persona of them being their, like, leader, and it's like, listen, I don't care one bit about you guys suck, and I'm even, like, sugarcoating it, because he really lays into them, and it's not really surprising, since Licht constantly talks about how much he hates humans. Why the hell would he give a shit about, like, these, like, 3 assholes? He basically even says that they've been doing this out of their own selfishness and their own self-preservation, and they're just, like, kind of awful. And obviously, they're the bad guys no matter what, but they're, like, Licht is the kind of bad guy where it's like, he at the very least thinks he's doing the right thing in some capacity, even though it's evil. But the rest of them were, like, bad to the bone, all the way down to their cores. Rades especially. Even if they had some kind of, like, traumatic backstories, they're still evil. Rades, he's just not, he's annoying. I think that's really his worst crime, honestly. In any event, they're surprised that he hates them and whatever, and like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, is this really that big of a surprise for you guys? Licht then puts the final stones on the tablet, and a large amount of, at least light, starts emanating from it, and it's, like, I don't know whether this is directly revealed before, but that place is where the giant, like, demon skull is located with the statue of the original Wizard King. And so they're actually, I want to say, pretty close to Hodge Village, which was Asta and Yuno's village. And it's upon this that we start seeing at least a glimpse into what Licht and Raya's ultimately, their goal was. And it's in part to become their true selves. And at this point, where I guess we really haven't known exactly. We knew that, like, they were, like, elves, but, like, in Licht's case, he's possessing a human's body, so, like, what could that mean? And then it kind of all comes together, and we jump back to Raya, who has now gotten a power boost, and his hair is turning completely white, and he's getting pointy ears and all that. He's starting to turn into a elf again, and honestly, I'm surprised it took this long for us to see what he looked like as an elf, because every time we saw a backflash, it was always from his perspective. So, I don't know why they felt the need to keep it, like, a secret, seeing as we knew what Licht looked like as an elf. It seemed like a weird thing. Either way, he is now, like, powering up as an elf and becoming his true self. Meanwhile, the person in the sphere wakes up, and it's clear right from the get-go, like, even before all this happened, that, like, the person in the sphere is Licht. He was a disembodied soul, I guess, more or less, and he was, like, taking over Vengeance's body. So, presumably Vengeance gets full control over his body again, and Licht goes back into his original body, which was being preserved by this giant sphere thing. So, he's clearly getting back into his body. I believe Mimosa says that, like, oh, there's a lot of, like, crazy energy coming from it, but it's not human mana. It's not human magic. It's something else. And it's clearly, like, elfish magic or whatever. Elven magic. However, the final thing that we see in this episode is really probably the biggest surprise. Like Licht turning on his lackeys really isn't that surprising. Raya becoming an elf himself, or at least showing that how he looks like an elf, not all that surprising. Julius dying, at this point, not all that surprising. However, I would even argue to say that the, like, heartbeat, the person, the thing that they found in the center, the body of Licht, essentially, in the center of the hideout, is not even as surprising. What's really surprising is that Yuno is an elf. Or, to be perfectly honest, he's probably more like a possessed person with elfish, like, things. Maybe he's got, like, an elf person inside of him. That sounds weird. Either way, maybe he's possessed by an elf, and this is just kind of like his awakening. We don't know yet if he's going to be of sound mind, whether it's just going to be like, oh, his physical attributes have been boosted, and he's got pointy ears and like a tattoo or something on his face, but like he's still himself. Or maybe he's just his mind is taken over and he needs to kind of fight back from within to regain himself. Either way, his team is going to be really messed up because now Licht is right there. Presumably he's more powerful in his original body. And if Yuno is not of sound mind and is being controlled by this, like, elf, I guess, whatever, it's not going to be good for them. Something that's interesting, though, about all of this, and, like, I mentioned it last time that, like, Licht's magic is very reminiscent of the original Wizard King, and then both of their magic, like, when they make a sword out of their light magic, it looks very similar to Asta's anti-magic sword. And on top of that, that stone tablet was in the demon, like, monster, whatever, that the original Wizard King defeated, and so now you have Asta, who has this anti-magic sword that looks like a demon, and Yuno, who clearly has, like, advanced magic and whatnot, who potentially is taken over by a elf. It seems like maybe there's a lot of, like, fluidity between this. Like, maybe, what if the original Wizard King was a elf, and that people didn't know this, but, like, maybe he's an elf or something like that, and that's just, like, or he learned this kind of magic from elves, and maybe him and Licht knew each other, and there's definitely a connection between all of this. I don't see that there being, at the very least, I don't see there being no connection between any of this. I think it's pretty obvious. Overall, I really like this episode. I don't know if this is being like a slightly shorter review or whether I'm just kind of getting through it. But I really liked this episode a lot. It had some pretty good reveals with Yuno basically going Super Saiyan. When they first show him changing, he's got like basically the Super Saiyan aura around him. Like it's not even really any different. It's basically just Super Saiyan, and then his hair turns white and he gets pointy ears. That's, like, really the only difference that makes him not just a regular Super Saiyan. I don't know. Overall, I enjoyed this episode. While I could have used a little bit more Julius in my life, I think this is a pretty reasonable way for him to go out. Eventually, he would need to step down or die, so that other people could become the Wizard King. But I don't know. I could have used more of him, but I feel like this is okay. It gives Yami drive to fight the Eye of the Midnight Sun even more so. And it really gives Asta and Yuno, well, we'll see what happens with Yuno, but it gives Asta a bit more drive himself to be probably a bit more angry at the Eye of the Midnight Sun and Licht than he already is right now. Right now, he's just kind of he's fighting them out of duty. But, like, given his mindset of, like, oh, well, why don't we just talk about stuff? I could see him flying off the handle with now not only knowing that Yuno is an elf, but also that Julius is dead. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys thought down below in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. That way you'll get all the notifications when I upload. I will see you guys in another video. So long!